right. Thank you so much for your cooperation. That, I think, worked pretty well. So if somebody's helping direct you to the line, the dreamers and the makers of our city that bring new innovation and to the market and create things that we didn't even know that we needed. I could whistle really loud into this microphone. It might make you lose a little bit of your hearing. They bring new food and concepts to our city, and they make our lives easier. They cure diseases, and they help make people feel better. I'm excited to hear from our speakers today, but first I want to thank our sponsors, HSC Next and RSM. So please join me in thanking them for hosting this wonderful luncheon. I would also like to recognize our elected officials that are here with us today. Fort Worth City Councilwoman Elizabeth Beck, who represents the near south side, which we are located in. And that's the neighborhood that we're in right now. And Kevin Lynch, who serves on the Fort Worth ISD School Board, is up here at the table. I also want to recognize the team from Fort Worth ISD that is recording and live streaming this event today for us. Thank you to the students in the Advanced Media program at Southwest High School for your hard work today. And to their faculty advisors, Rick Sapp, Sean Hadd, and Darcy McCready. This is a group that also was the 2023 Skills USA National Champions in Video News Production. Let's give them a round of applause as well. The recording of today's event will be available next week on HSC Next YouTube channel if you'd like to share that with other folks as well. We'll also have with us today the Junior Achievement Pitch Competition winners from Arlington ISD. Welcome to Fort Worth. They had a 2-day JA Entrepreneurship and Innovation Conference last week, and at that conference they had to pitch a competition to sum up their year-long entrepreneurship experience. The winning company is called It's the Little Things, where they created tiny trinkets around personalized memories. And they're here today with their teacher, Kevin. Can we please give them a round of applause? So getting on with the program, our first speaker today is going to update us on the current state of entrepreneurship in Fort Worth. He will share with us some amazing things that have been happening in our community since we last gathered a year ago, and he will share some of what he sees on the horizon for entrepreneurial community. He has a long history of entrepreneurship and has started multiple companies in multiple cities around the United States, but he's a product of the city just a few miles to the east that starts with D, which I do not have a problem saying. We're all friends with our neighbors to the east, Dallas. He is the co-founder of DEC Network, a nonprofit organization that has been building entrepreneurial communities in the Metroplex for over a decade. He also built the world's first accelerator program focused on physical health about 100 yards from where we are sitting today. And he is the most Fort Worth, Dallas guy I know. Please welcome to the stage Trey Bowles, the managing director of Techstars Physical Health Fort Worth Accelerator.
All right, good afternoon. How is everybody? Good. So I want to start out by first saying, how many of you have been to the state of the city? Or the state of education? Or the state of anything formal? That is not what this is. So we're going to get rowdy, we're going to get irreverent, and we're going to act like entrepreneurs for a little bit. So if I say somebody's name that you know, you can stand up and yell and scream. You can point at them, you can hug them, you can take pictures, do video, whatever you want to do. We got to make this a little bit fun. So thank you, Anne. I am pleased to deliver the State of Entrepreneurship address and share some, not all. So if I don't say something that you're involved with and you want us to know about it, please come tell me, and we will make sure that we include it as we push things out. All that's going in Fort Worth's burgeoning entrepreneurial ecosystem. And there's a lot of stuff here. The goal of this particular talk is to hit you in the face with so many unbelievable, amazing things that are going on here that you leave remembering some of them, but just knowing Fort Worth is killing it. So I'll start with the city. The city continues its ongoing work with the Institute for Justice and their Cities Works team. In work that started last year, it was announced at this very event that the Institute of Justice published their Barriers to Business Study and Assessment of Fort Worth. While there were several positive takeaways, Fort Worth is less expensive to start a business in, but has a number of higher fees and forms to complete. A significant issue was the lack of a one-stop shop website to provide and support small businesses and entrepreneurs at all stages of the entrepreneurial journey. So what did the city's Economic Development Department and Development Service Group did? They were able to organize and build out this online one-stop shop in record time, improving Fort Worth's IFJ score in the category from a 1 out of 5 to a 4 out of 5. This is incredible progress. There you go. The City of Fort Worth also partnered with the DEC Network to open a new entrepreneur center in Fort Worth called Create Fort Worth, right here in the near south side, right over here. The city's Entrepreneurship and Innovation Committee approved $500,000 in funding to open the center and provide 2 years of runway. Entrepreneurial community leaders in Fort Worth came together and named and branded the space. If you are here and you were a part of that process, will you please stand up so we can acknowledge you? And they were pleased to have the grand opening for Create Fort Worth last week. It's literally 40 yards that way. So if you have not been there, shame on you. But you're also welcome at any time, so come on over. This is a big year for our foundational entrepreneur support organizations. Tech Fort Worth celebrates 25 years anniversary this year. They have done a great job supporting startups, going through their programs to foster their success. And the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber, which is celebrating 50 years anniversary this year, continue their success of their Echo in Fort Worth, celebrating the makers, dreamers, and doers in the community. HSC Next won a $2 million grant from Tarrant County to run one of the first municipally funded small business innovation research Phase 0 programs. That's pretty cool, even if you don't know what that is. And this is where it gets cool. So far, 63 local companies have gone through the program. They have raised $14.5 million in pending funding and generated $350,000 in actual funding at this point. And best of all, over 50% of those companies are either minority, veteran, or women-owned. Good job, Fort Worth. I told you, and I'm just getting started, so you guys better settle in for a minute. TCU's Neely School of Business was ranked as the 14th best college for business by U.S. News and World Report and the 22nd best MBA program in the world for entrepreneurship. They ranked as the 27th best undergraduate school for entrepreneurship by the Princeton Review. Well done, TCU. As a reminder of the importance of entrepreneurs to our community, please take a look at the 2023 Sparkyard Jobs Report that's on every chair that you have. This year, based on post-pandemic data from 2021, Sparkyard's analysis showed that new firms in Tarrant County created 24,000 jobs. What an outstanding number. It's a good place to work, Fort Worth. And more big news this week, and that Sparkyard is headed for a new home. After founding it 4 years ago with the City of Fort Worth's Economic Development Department, TCU, HSC Next, it's handing over the platform to new leadership. I would like to specifically recognize Marco Johnson for his leadership in the past 4 years, pulling that together. There he is in the back. After a competitive process this summer, HSC Next announced earlier this week that Tamara Payne from Ensemble Co-working will be taking over the Sparkyard platform next year. She's got more friends than that. Y'all stand up and give her a round of applause. Come on. We are all excited to see what Tamara's going to do and take the platform to new heights. Please connect with her if you'd like to learn more about Sparkyard or if you have any ideas and want to volunteer and get involved. Incubators and accelerators. After celebrating 10 years in operations, Cowtown Angel members launched their first sidecar fund to help members invest more into companies. Good job, guys. Tech Fort Worth produced a full-day pitch camp in the last summer with 11 high-growth companies, helping them hone their storytelling skills and to work to stand out in the eyes of investors. Thank you for that, Tech Fort Worth. And the first Medical Innovation District kicked off in the near South Side earlier this fall, featuring a delegation of the City of Fort Worth, providing hands-on tour of the medical and health innovation areas within Fort Worth. And they are planning many more, so if you didn't get to make that one, you'll be able to make one soon. 6 female founders were awarded program funding for the 3rd year with partners from Texas Women's University Center for Women Entrepreneurs, as well as the relaunch of their Women in Wealth virtual event. It's here for TWU. We saw more news and more excitement out of Aggieland North, now officially called Texas A&M Fort Worth this year. There you go. Yeah. That's what Aggies do. They make this really loud, weird noise. It's a great noise, yeah. The ground has been broken on the first of their 3 buildings on the south end of downtown, and we remain excited about what having Texas A&M system in Fort Worth will mean for innovation, commercialization, research, and other opportunities. We saw 2 new key hires at UTA this year with Kim Miller and Paul Corson. Are either of you guys here today? All right. Good to see you. We're excited for their new vision and the bringing to campus and the innovators and entrepreneurs that their programs will produce in the years to come. UTA is also conducting a study on the impact that our region has on biomanufacturing hub. This work could lay the groundwork for bright future in biotech jobs, advanced manufacturing, and innovation. This one's, there you go, UTA. Thanks, Scott. Next, near and dear to our heart, is Techstars Physical Health. There you go. Techstars is in our 2nd year of program here in the great city of Fort Worth after our stellar first year with amazing support from our Fort Worth entrepreneurial ecosystem and our amazing partners, including UNT Health Science Center, the city of Fort Worth, Tarrant County, and Gulf Capital. Our 2nd year, we're seeing even more amazing companies. We looked at more than 4,000 companies to finalize in on the 10 companies that are here today and living in Fort Worth for the next few weeks. These founders came from Tunisia, Italy, the Ukraine, Mexico City, Canada, Rhode Island, Nashville, Houston, and more. Will you guys stand up so we can welcome you to Fort Worth? They are looking for introductions to investors, hospital and healthcare systems, and so if you would like to find them when this is over, they would be more than willing to accept your help. Companies that have come through the Techstars Physical Health Program in the last year have raised more than $6.5 million. And I'd like to give a special shout out to our program manager, Jordan Warnament, who is the reason that we are able to do what we do. All right, so also on a couple of these tables, you'll see these QR codes. I wish that you would start scanning them right now and passing them around. If you don't pass them around, I will continue to encourage you to pass them around. We have an exciting event on December 6th. It's called Demo Day. It's where all these amazing founders will come together and get to show you what they've learned and accomplished in the last 3 months. They will pitch their company on stage. It'll be a great event. It'll be hosted at UNT Health Science Center, and we want you all to be there. These QR codes are really simple. Just scan them, and you can RSVP. If not, we'll send you an email as well. Thank you for indulging me on the Techstars front. A new pilot research internship program with Tarleton State University got students matched up with high-tech startups. There you go, Tarleton State. Tech Fort Worth hosted several great ecosystem connection events at their Impact Showcase this fall and an outstanding Tiki Tech Together this summer. And Sparkyard's monthly yard party continues to grow in its 2nd year, continuously growing and connecting new entrepreneurs into the community. How many of y'all have been to a Sparkyard happy hour? Well, you're all invited. We also celebrated this week the Empower Her pitch, put together by Elise Dickerson at Eosera. There you go. Three great companies competed this year, Audiolo, Baritone, and Hangio, and the winner was Audiolo, with Hangio taking second place. Congratulations if you competed in that process. Also, we've seen great growth in the Horned Frog Investor Network. Here's some exciting updates from them. They've invested in 10 companies to date. They've deployed close to $5 million into these companies. This puts the Horned Frog Investor Network into the top decile of investment groups in Fort Worth in terms of activity. They want to be a community benefit for both founders, investors to leverage. That's why they will start to lean in more on educational routes, and they're excited to launch an annual Venture 101 event in February. They'll have some of the most successful VCs in the entire country that have committed to join and educate the Fort Worth community on venture capital. So if you guys see Andrew Hicks or Rodney D'Souza, talk to them about getting involved with that. February. There he is, Andrew in the back. Thanks, buddy. Communication. The Innovate Fort Worth podcast now is in its 4th year. Just released their 100th episode. You've got Cameron will be signing autographs after the lunch, so you can find him up here if you want to. John Golf was their 100th episode. The show has featured all 20 of the Techstars Fort Worth companies over the last 2 years, but the best guest is in episode 58. So I won't tell you who that is, but you can go check it out. It's me, apparently. Thanks, Cameron. That's not the best one, but go watch some of the good ones out there. They're incredible. A new podcast called Immigrates launched this year, hosted by Fort Worth's own Munatsi Mayande. It features, there you go. It features the stories of immigrant innovators and entrepreneurs, which we know is an important driver of entrepreneurship in our city. A delegation from Fort Worth just returned from the Smart Cities Expo World Congress in Barcelona. I've been several times. This is an incredible event, and I guarantee you that Fort Worth is very well represented over there. Last year, they hosted a booth where they gave away TX whiskey tastings. It was the talk of the entire conference, and with thousands and thousands of people being there, they were excited to welcome Fort Worth back again. They're spreading the news about the cool things that we have going on in Fort Worth. And the cities, it begins with Fort Worth, reach an audience far and wide with its highlights of all the cool and innovative things that many of you in the crowd are leading. There you go. Hey, let's take a second. Everybody stand up and give yourselves a round of applause, please. Everybody, get up. There you go. Pat yourself on the back. I'm not done, but I'm going to keep going. New programs have also been brought to Fort Worth, including Co-Starters in partnership with the Hispanic Chamber. I get to work right next door to Jose Alfaro at Create Fort Worth, and he is such a strong advocate for entrepreneurship in the city, and he is a well-respected thought leader on entrepreneurship across the country. We are lucky to have him, and luckily finally to have a Co-Starters program in Fort Worth. Jose, are you here? Well, if you want to see him, he's 40 yards that way, so go say hi. The Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber also launched their Main Street initiative, focusing on bringing new businesses to the historic North Side. A similar effort will be coming to the Polytechnic neighborhood as well. And through the Lansar program, the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber has brought the Kauffman Foundation Fast Track program back to Fort Worth. This was one of Mr. Kauffman's signature programs for training entrepreneurs. And in case you're wondering, Lansar means to launch in Spanish. Government. There was such a great deal of progress this year in the city of Fort Worth, making it easier to open, expand, and maintain your businesses in the city. The city's development services teams started hosting quarterly Development 101 workshops for local small businesses, which has been very, very popular and well attended. These events included detailed tutorial presentations and discussions with city staff, feedback, all that has been extremely positive. The Development Services Department recently brought on an inspection trainer to improve consistency in the local inspections process through a combination of classroom training sessions and ride-alongs with new hires. This year, the Development Services is also plans to improve inspections portion of the city website with more details about what inspections are necessary and what staff will be looking for. Very valuable for businesses as they're trying to grow. This year, small business liaisons were added to both economic development and development services departments. The EcoDev Small Business Liaison, Dexter Sykes, will assist small businesses with getting started, growing, and scaling. The Development Services Small Business Liaison, Jasmine Correa, will help guide small businesses through the appropriate city permits needed to open their brick and mortar location. We are excited for all the energy and knowledge that they have brought to our community and the practical implications that are actually helping businesses grow. There's still much more work that needs to be done, but there's extremely positive, encouraging steps moving in the right direction. What I will say is, as you listen to all the things that are going on in Fort Worth, what I hope you see is a breadth of activity across multiple stakeholder groups, from cities and municipalities to chambers to entrepreneurial groups to universities. It is cities that pull together that type of approach that succeed and excel. And having had the opportunity to look at many cities all across the country, I have not seen any city that is more poised to build upon the potential that Fort Worth has. So please join us, continue to get engaged, to serve, to lead, to make Fort Worth second to none in the country for entrepreneurship and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Trey. There's a whole lot going on in Fort Worth, and what I noticed also is there's a whole lot going on just yards away from our current location. So if anybody else hadn't noticed that, the near south side is definitely a hotbed for many of these activities. Thank you so much. We're really excited about what's going on in Fort Worth, and the state of entrepreneurship in this city is strong. Next, we will get the perspective of what is happening in entrepreneurship at the national level. Our next speaker is the founder and president of an organization that is working hard to advocate for entrepreneur-friendly policies in our nation's capital. Most of us in this room are too busy with our own businesses trying to make sure that we continue to make payroll to think about what's happening in Washington, D.C. But that's what our next speaker is here to come talk about. He has a long career in the finance world and was in the room in 2008 when the bailouts of the largest banks were being negotiated. But something changed for John when he started to learn where jobs were actually created in this country. It wasn't the big companies that he had been representing for so long, and it wasn't from existing small businesses, as was always the assumption in Washington. It was from new firms. And John set off to write a book on this phenomenon that was published a decade ago called Where the Jobs Are: Entrepreneurship and the Soul of American Economy. This revelation led to our speakers founding the organization that he now represents. Please welcome to the stage John Deary, the founder and president of the Center for American Entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much. I am thrilled to be here in Fort Worth. There is so much that's going on. We just got it in detail from Trey, but it's clear that Fort Worth is a major entrepreneurship center in the United States now and in the future, and it is thrilling to be here. So I really appreciate the invitation from Cameron, my friend of 10 years, who really showed me the way as I made the detour from finance into entrepreneurship. Cameron was my tour guide. As he was at the Kauffman Foundation at the time, and I pretty much owe everything that's happened in my career with CAE. It wouldn't have happened without Cameron. So Cameron, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And I was born in Texas, so it's good to be back in Texas. I always like to begin these visits with Ronald Reagan's 8 most terrifying words in the English language. I'm from Washington, and I'm here to help. No, actually, I'm here to tell you, to sort of back up from the perspective that Trey just gave you, to give you a bit of a national perspective, and to tell you about the Center for American Entrepreneurship, because the Center for American Entrepreneurship really is, and I'll say it at the beginning, I'll say it at the end, we really hope that you think of us as your team in Washington, because that, and I'm speaking specifically to entrepreneurs, but also the people who invest in entrepreneurs, who mentor entrepreneurs. We're your team in Washington. As you are working to build and grow your new businesses, and we all know how important they are to the economy, to economic growth, job creation, opportunity expansion. We are working every single day on your behalf in Washington. Why? Why did we start CAE? As was just indicated, I spent the vast majority of my career in banking and financial policy. I started my career at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which is the central bank of the United States, and then I went to an economic policy group called the Financial Services Forum, which was a membership organization comprised of the CEOs of the largest financial institutions. So think Hank Paulson and Jamie Dimon and 18 or 19 other guys like that. Unfortunately, it was all guys. Actually, later on, there was one woman, Abby Johnson from Fidelity, but it was the defining experience of my life up until the detour into entrepreneurship was the 2008 financial crisis, which I had a ringside seat to because of where I was working. I was the policy director at the forum, and then by way of some relationships on Capitol Hill, I got pulled into the policy response that became Dodd-Frank. So I got about 20 years of Washington policy experience crammed into about 3 years. But it was as we were coming out of the financial crisis and Great Recession, which ended in the spring of 2009. The economy started to grow again in the spring of 2009, but 2 years into the recovery, so by the spring of 2011, the economy was still growing very, very slowly, only about 2%. And unemployment was still, this is 2 years into the recovery, unemployment was still north of 9%, which is staggering to think about now as we stand here at 3.5%. And this is despite unprecedented policy action in Washington. Those of you who are old enough to remember this, going back to 10 years, the big Obama fiscal stimulus, about $900 billion fiscal stimulus, big jolt to the economy, massive intervention by the Federal Reserve, 0% interest rates for 5 years, 3 rounds of the very controversial quantitative easing. Congress chipped in with funny-sounding programs like cash for clunkers and cash for caulkers, all designed to inject more money into the economy. And we just weren't getting the traction that everybody expected. It was as if the gearing on the economy was broken. So in May of 2011, having recognized this and sort of detected, you could almost feel there was this shrug in Washington as if policymakers are thinking, you know, we've done everything we can think of. I decided to launch a project at the forum to try to come up with new ideas for policymakers about how they could accelerate economic growth and job creation. I started to follow my nose through the research. A lot of it came out of the Kauffman Foundation and by other scholars at universities around the country. Interestingly, there were a lot of folks, Cameron, I don't know if you've ever observed this, but there were a lot of folks who were doing research and coming to similar conclusions at the same time. And 3 conclusions of this research were fascinating. First, new businesses, startups, are disproportionately responsible for innovation in the economy. Existing firms also innovate, but not in the same way or to the same extent as new businesses. Startups are responsible for most of what you might think of as the transformational, the disruptive innovation in the economy. And that makes sense if you think about it. The reason why people start a new business is either they don't want to work for the man anymore, they want to work for themselves, or they have something new. They have a new product, a new service, a new twist on an old idea. The economics behind that is we know from the great work of an American economist named Robert Solow, who won the Nobel Prize for this insight, that economic growth is driven principally by gains in productivity, doing more with less, driven by innovation. So innovation is the really important contributor to economic growth, and the research was showing that startups were disproportionately responsible for innovation. You guys are really important. Second, startups are also responsible for most net new job creation in the economy. Again, existing firms obviously create jobs, but they also shed jobs as they get better at what they do, as they concentrate on what they do best, as they incorporate technology, capital, automation. Startups are responsible for most new jobs on a net basis. So from the standpoint of innovation, economic growth, and job creation, the things I was interested in, it became clear startups was where the action is. Third conclusion, and this is the real head slapper. that the research was showing. Startup rates in the United States had been in decline, or have been in decline, for most of the past 4 decades. I say most because something very interesting has happened since the onset of the pandemic that I'm going to come back to at the end. But for most of the past 4 decades, entrepreneurship has been in decline in the United States. Frankly, when I read that, I didn't believe it. I mean, how could that be the case? We're the United States of America. We're the most innovative and entrepreneurial country on planet Earth. We have Silicon Valley. We have Shark Tank. We have Fort Worth. I mean, how could that possibly be? This is the chart that changed the course of my career. And this is a chart taken from work that was originally done by good friends of CAE's and Cameron's, Bob Lighton, who was the head of entrepreneurship and research at the whole story here is the top line, or the blue line. It's the fraction of all businesses in the economy that are new. So all businesses in the economy are the denominator. New businesses are the numerator. It is a simple but very powerful gauge of the business formation rate, or what you might call the entrepreneurialness of the U.S. economy. And as you can see, an alarming and consistent decline over the entire period from 78 until 2019 at least. That decline indicates that the U.S. economy is becoming less entrepreneurial, more concentrated among large incumbent companies, less, the term that's used by economists, less dynamic. It would also explain why all the Herculean policy efforts in Washington to stimulate economic growth and job creation after the Great Recession weren't working. Simply put, policymakers were digging in the wrong place. They weren't focused on the real economic engine, which was breaking down. The key question was why? When I called all the people who were doing the research and asked them that question, why on earth is this happening? They said, we don't know. We have certain ideas, certain suspicions, hypotheses, but fundamentally we don't understand it. A colleague of mine and I at the forum decided that that would be probably a pretty important thing to figure out. The question was how? And after thinking about it for a while, we ultimately decided, if you want to know what's going on with American entrepreneurs, probably best, or one good way to figure it out would be to get the hell out of Washington, D.C., travel the country, and go ask them. So that's what we did. We convinced the forum to underwrite this road trip in the summer of 2011. We hit the road, and we conducted roundtables all over the country, including in Texas, asking entrepreneurs a very simple question: what's in your way? And they told us, among other things, they told us about problems finding employees with the skills that they need. They told us about how the education system was not preparing people to be hired by 21st century businesses, including startups. They told us that our immigration policies are insane and complicating their efforts to recruit the kind of talent that they needed. They told us about how healthcare, childcare, retirement insecurity, student debt made entrepreneurship particularly risky and complicated their efforts to attract and recruit the kind of skilled talent that they needed. They told us about problems in getting the capital that they needed. They explained how regulations, the burden, complexity, uncertainty of regulation cost them time and money and distracted them from what they should be focused on. They told us also about how tax complexity also distracted them from what they ought to be focused on, and how aspects of the tax code actually undermined their chances of success, or undermined the interest of the people who were investing in them. Some of them even pointed to the multi-decade decline in government funding of innovation, and many, many other observations that they shared with us. That summer on the road with American Entrepreneurships changed my career. I knew, and my colleague knew, that we had gathered information and insights that nobody in Washington was focused on, nobody in Washington even knew. So I decided to write the book that was mentioned to document what entrepreneurs had told us all over the country about what was in their way, and to take a first crack at a policy agenda designed to respond to what they had shared with us. That book was published in 2014, and as I was finishing that book, it occurred to me there's no organization in Washington, D.C. whose purpose is specifically to work with policymakers, educate them about everything I just ran through with you, about the importance of startups and entrepreneurs to innovation, economic growth, job creation, opportunity expansion, that entrepreneurship appeared to be in trouble, what entrepreneurs had told us why that is, and what to do about it. So after thinking about it for a while and getting my wife's permission, I decided to leave the Financial Services Forum and start that organization, and that organization is the Center for American Entrepreneurship. We launched in 2017. In the 7 years since, CAE has succeeded in putting entrepreneurship on the policy map in Washington, D.C. We have built strong relationships with members of Congress, key members of Congress on the key committees, their staff, agencies of the executive branch. We know them, they know, and they rely on us. We also established, and this is little inside baseball stuff, but take my word for it, we also established the first ever entrepreneurship caucuses in the House and the Senate. Caucuses are best thought of as clubs. They're sort of an informal aspect of the policy-making machinery on the Hill. They're a way for members of Congress to really learn about, conduct events on, invite guest speakers in to talk about that topic. There are caucuses for everything under the sun. There are hundreds of caucuses. There had never been, ever, an entrepreneurship caucus in Congress. That's vivid evidence of the extent to which entrepreneurship was just not on the radar screen in Washington. We changed that. We established the House and Senate Entrepreneurship Caucus in 2019. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota is the Democratic co-chair of the Senate caucus. Tim Scott from South Carolina is the Republican co-chair. The House caucus is bigger. The House is bigger, so there's 6 co-chairs. And those caucuses have been enormously productive both in terms of events and in producing of legislation. And speaking of legislation, over the last 7 years or so that we've been in operation, CAE has been involved in facilitating the introduction of about 25 pieces of innovation and entrepreneurship-focused legislation, the most recent of which was introduced yesterday. And it's arguably, I think it's one of the most important things that we've ever done. Access to capital, all the entrepreneurs in the room and the folks who invest in them and the folks who mentor them know, access to capital is a constant challenge for entrepreneurs. Only, and many of you may be aware of this distributional problem, only about 2% of all equity capital, by equity I mean both angel capital and venture capital that is provided by investors for a stake in the company. Very important to startups, especially those that have either the potential or the intention to grow very quickly. Only about 2% of equity capital goes to women founders in this country. Less than 1% goes to entrepreneurs of color. There are many reasons for this, not the least of which, from a public policy standpoint, is there are aspects of the Investment Company Act of 1940, the original governing piece of legislation that governs the regulation and various requirements associated with private investment funds, that actually have the effect of boxing out women investors and investors of color, and reinforcing, pardon the way I say this, but it's the most direct way to say it, and reinforcing the whiteness and the maleness of the investor base. 92% of equity investors in this country are white men. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a white guy. I'm a white guy. But, and we all know this, who gets funded depends a lot on who's doing the investing, right? There is a phenomenon known as homophily. It's a great word. There's research documenting this phenomenon that investors tend to invest because investing is a personal thing. You're separating yourself from capital. So it's a very personal thing, very human thing, and it's risky, of course. Investors tend to invest in entrepreneurs who look like them, who have similar life experiences as them, and are starting businesses that they can relate to. So if the investor base is 92% white male, it's as logical and predictable as night following day that 98% of the people that they invest in are going to be white men. So in order to get more capital to women founders and entrepreneurs of color, we need to diversify the investor base. That's what the Expanding American Entrepreneurship Act, I love the title of the act because that's exactly what the act will do. Expand American entrepreneurship by expanding access to capital by diversifying the investor base. It was introduced yesterday. It is co-sponsored by Jerry Moran of Kansas, Tim Scott of South Carolina, and Mark Warner of Virginia, himself a former entrepreneur. It is bipartisan. We're working on it being bipartisan in the House, but if you're on Twitter or LinkedIn, follow me, follow the Center for American Entrepreneurship. You'll see the posting of this release of the bill, the dropping of the bill, the introduction of the bill. We'd love to have it amplified. This is really, really important public policy. We've also worked very hard this year on the implementation of CHIPS and Science. I know a number of you are aware of this act. It's the most significant piece of innovation-related legislation to come down the pike in 60 years. It's also America's game plan to meet the competitive threat from China. There is a difference in Washington, though, between passing a piece of legislation, which is authorization, and appropriation. Just because legislation gets passed or authorized doesn't mean that Congress is actually going to fund it. So we've been very, very active now that the act was passed and signed by President Biden a year ago in advocating that it be fully funded, fully implemented, so that we really can maintain America's innovation leadership in the world by way of the CHIPS and Science Act. As part of that, another thing that we've been very active on is high-skilled immigration reform. We all know how important immigrants are to entrepreneurship generally, but we see the passage of the CHIPS and Science Act with significant Republican support as a new and urgent opportunity for high-skilled immigration reform for the simple reason that we don't have the workforce that we need to implement the act. We need thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands more scientists, engineers, and other skilled workers to fully implement the act. Even if we got our act together on the education front, if we did everything right, we would still need to import part of that talent. That means high-skilled immigration reform. On the tax front, something that a lot of people in this room might well be interested in, particularly the entrepreneurs, you all may be aware because this became an issue this year. It's an issue that just started tax year 2022, and so it's relevant for the filing of startups' taxes this year. When the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, the big tax reform bill that was passed during the Trump administration, when that happened in 2017, as a pay-for the tax cuts, Congress changed the tax treatment of research and development, which is very important to startups. For 70 years prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, companies in the United States, including startups, could expense their research and development investments in the first year. It's called first-year expensing. That was changed to generate revenue to pay for the 2017 tax cuts to where businesses starting tax year last year, so this year's taxes, have to amortize over 5 years those expenses, which has a massive impact on the tax liability, what startups owe. Millions of startups across the country got a very unpleasant phone call from their accountant about June of this year saying, oh yeah, you know how you weren't going to have any tax bill this year because you're doing all this research and development and you're going to expense it and write it off? Yeah, that's wrong. You're going to have a tax bill. In fact, it's going to be very big. In fact, it looks like it's going to threaten your company. So this was a hair-on-fire sort of issue for the innovation community coming right on the heels of the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, and we have been working very, very hard with other organizations in Washington to get that fixed. So those are just a few of the issues, to give you a sense as to what we do, a few of the issues that we work on, although there are many others. I'll close with a more recent snapshot of American entrepreneurship because this one is a little depressing. We don't want to leave you depressed. This is monthly new business applications, which is the paperwork that people have to file in order to launch a new business. And this is over the period 2011 to last month of 2023. And as you can see, for 10 years prior to the pandemic in 2020, new business applications were pretty steady. They were actually, there was the 3 or 4 year sort of slight increase, but pretty steady. There was a plunge in early 2020 as the economy shut down because of COVID, as you would expect. But then very unexpectedly and very interestingly, there was a surge I mean a surge in new business applications, which, when you think about it, is not terribly surprising in the sense that when 20 million people suddenly lose their jobs, a lot of them are going to start businesses. I mean, call it entrepreneurship of necessity, if you will. It was my guess, and there was a lot of head scratching as to what this meant. It was my guess that as the economy reopened and began to stabilize, that new business applications would sort of revert back to the norm. But as you can see, that's not what happened. The spike, the surge in new business applications has continued, not at the same level, if you will, as the initial spike, but way above the historical norm. Is this the long-awaited inflection point turn for American entrepreneurship? Is this the end of the 4-decade decline in American entrepreneurship? We think it's too early to tell. There are aspects of the data that worry us, but clearly something very interesting and very potentially exciting is going on. It might be tempting to conclude, as you look at that entrepreneurship in America is fine, and it's unworthy of or unneeding of the attention from policymakers. We think that would be a mistake. Instead, we see the rise in the number of Americans taking the risk to strike out on their own to build something new as an important opportunity, as a call to action. It's our view that now is the time for American policymakers to pursue truly bold pro-entrepreneurship, pro-innovation policy agenda, one that reinforces this surge in new business applications and apparently entrepreneurship, that supports the people that have taken the leap to date and that will encourage others to do the same. The reality is that entrepreneurship remains a risky business, incredibly important for all the reasons I stated: innovation, economic growth, job creation, opportunity expansion. You all, the entrepreneurs in the room, are doing the real hard God's work of the American economy. But it remains risky business, and most of the barriers, obstacles, and challenges that the entrepreneurs told me about on that initial road trip of roundtables are still around and still remain. We still have a lot of work to do. We will continue to do it. And as I said at the beginning, my hope is that you will think of us as your team in Washington. As entrepreneurs are launching and growing and building their businesses, we're working every day with policymakers to maximize the chances of their success. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here in Fort Worth and celebrate entrepreneurship with you. Please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, John, for those remarks. It's an interesting idea for policymakers to be taking advice from experts, which I encourage all of them to do. Not always the case, I'm sure. Thank you for what you're doing in Washington and for making our country a great place to start and grow businesses. So we hope you'll keep that work up and that all of you will avail yourself of that expertise in DC. So up next, we will have our keynote speaker, who is going to be interviewed in a fireside chat format. She brings us to a perspective that she sees in entrepreneurship at on the world global stage. Asking the questions will be Cameron Cushman, host of Innovate Fort Worth's podcast and Associate Vice President of Innovation Ecosystems at HSC Next. Please welcome Cameron, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Thanks everybody for coming today. Thanks everybody for coming today. Happy Global Entrepreneurship Week. Hope you guys are enjoying this awesome event. There's so much cool stuff going on in Fort Worth. John, thanks for sharing the great work you're doing in Washington. If you don't know about CAE, please come and talk to him afterwards. Trey, thank you for giving us the great update on everything going on here in Fort Worth. It's really gratifying and fun to see all the cool stuff that's been happening. So, Mael, I am so excited that you were in Fort Worth. This is your first trip to Fort Worth, and we are so excited that you're here. And we're running a little... Here we go, yes. And we're running a little behind on time. They have your bio in the program, but I'm going to just jump right in. It's a really tough question, but I think you're up to the challenge. What is Techstars?
Happy Friday, everyone. Very happy to be here. As Cameron mentioned, this is my first time in Fort Worth. I'm based in New York. I'm French. I always say that because I know people ask themselves when they start listening to me. Been in the US for 10 years now, and I've been to Texas multiple times, but I had never made it to Fort Worth, so thanks for inviting me. What is Texas? Techstars is the largest pre-seed investor in the world. We have 4,000 companies in our portfolio. We make investment globally. This year we're going to do probably 600 to 700 pre-seed investments. 10 of them are going to be here in the beautiful city of Fort Worth. And we invest across the board in terms of technology, anything from health tech, like this is the case here, to fintech, prop tech, alternative energy, anything that you can think of, as long as it's very early stage, that's what we do. And we work very closely with local communities because one of our key investment tenets is that founders succeed have more chance of success if they are well surrounded. No one succeeds alone, and the best way for a founder to have a shot at being successful is to have a great network, and the better the community around them, the more likely they are to succeed, which is why we decided to come to Fort Worth.
And we're so glad you did. We're so glad you're here. So this lunch is obviously about the state of entrepreneurship. There are very few people in the world that have as broad of a perspective as you do. As you travel around, as you launch new programs, as you meet with the startups in other cities around the world, tell us what you're seeing. Is this a good time to be an entrepreneur?
Yes. The entrepreneurs in the room, yes. It's always a good time to be an entrepreneur. And that comes from someone who's been an entrepreneur 3 times, and after 3 times was like, yeah, I think I'm good. Like, I'm not doing it a 4th time. I'm tired. I think it is a great time, particularly now, to be an entrepreneur because of a few things. One, there is a series of new paradigm-shifting technology coming. Whether it's AI, I'm sure you're sick and tired of hearing about it, but nevertheless it's there. And it's a completely change of planet for tech entrepreneurs. So AI is one of them. Nanotechnology is another one of them. Blockchain, it used to be popular to talk about blockchain, not anymore, but it's still a very important technology that changes the way identity works online. And so there's a lot of things happening from that perspective. The second thing that is happening that makes entrepreneurship really interesting right now is there are a lot of people who lost their job at big tech company. And what it means is that there is a lot of talent right now in the market who doesn't have anymore the golden handcuff that they used to have, because when you make a 7-figure compensation, you have a 7-figure package, somehow being an entrepreneur doesn't feel as sexy and interesting. And so like there's a lot of talent coming. On top of that, what I have seen, because I've been traveling a lot, is I think there's a lot of communities that have came to the realization that supporting the entrepreneur is actually a great way to grow their economy. And it seems obvious, but I can promise you that wasn't the case before. I'm not going to put a date, but I would go to a lot of places and talk to them about what entrepreneurs could bring to their city, to their state, to their country. And the answer was like, yeah, but you know, like why would we support young entrepreneurs? Why would we support early stage investors? It's going to take them 10 years to develop, and then we have so much more business to do on these core things that we've been working on for decades. Like, what's the point? And I think that has changed. Like, I am meeting with mayors and governors and senators and presidents and talking to them about what they can do to drive economic growth. And it starts with, hey, what can we do at my community level to get people on board? And that, to me, is a fundamental change. So yes, be an entrepreneur, change the world.
So the other groups you talk to are investors, right? So venture capitalists and LPs, limited partners, and entrepreneurs, of course, right? Those are kind of the three groups of people that you talk to a lot. So what's the investor mood out there? What are you seeing as far as how the economics and the economy is looking from the investor perspective?
So you mentioned two different sets of investors. There's the venture capitalists, which are the ones who give money or invest. They don't really give it. They invest it into startups. But these venture capitalists, most of the time, they are deploying money from someone else. And that someone else are family office, funds of funds, pension funds, university endowment, etc. So I'm going to start by talking about that second group, because here there's a very clear shift of mood, and that has trickle-down effect. So if you look at what happened before 2022, a lot of investors kind of discover, especially institutional, so again, endowment, pension fund, they kind of discovered venture capital. And there is a reason why venture capital is part of the alternative investment asset class, is because that was the alternative to like the main core investment. And so they discovered that, and then the fear of missing out came in. And so suddenly, endowment could not get enough exposure to venture capital. And they were knocking on doors to try to get into funds, and they were backing emerging GP who had literally zero experience investing. I used to joke that as long as you knew how to open the internet, you were likely going to be able to raise a $30 million fund. And I'm not kidding. I saw multiple examples of that happening. And so there was this general feeling that nothing could go wrong. Like venture capital was up and up and up, and as a capital allocator, your job was to try to get as much exposure as possible. Guess what? That kind of changed. Sometimes last year, a little earlier than that. Valuation in tech have started to go down, but they started to go down first in the public market. And so what happened is that a lot of the allocator that had a multi-asset class portfolio, meaning they had exposure to public market and private market, they had exposure to bonds and equity, but they also had exposure to alternative, aka venture capital, to a large extent. They started seeing a bit of a problem in their portfolio, which was they were way too exposed to venture capital. One, because they were worried about missing out before, but also because the valuation in public market went down faster than the valuation in the private market, and so mathematically the proportion, the exposure to private market increased without doing anything. And so they started looking at their portfolio and realizing that they were way too exposed to venture capital. And then on top of that, and I know it's going to sound a little silly, but I had enough conversation with quite a few of them to tell you this is real experience. I think for a lot of them, they started realizing that venture capital was an extremely volatile asset class, and that was not like the bond market, and that you could not guarantee 50% net IRR year in, year out. And I think that moment when they finally realize, wait a minute, this is actually a risky asset class, high volatility, tons of people who have no track record, you can't see the track record for half a decade, sometimes a decade, and they were like, oops, wait a minute. And so, again, I'm giving you the short version, but then what happened is that suddenly the capital allocator were like, wait. Like, we're not going to be backing venture capital as much. We're still going to continue to back some of them, like, and I'm sure you've seen some really large venture capital firm that raise billions of dollars even now. But generally speaking, if you're an emerging VC, it is now incredibly hard to raise money. If your track record is so-so, it is incredibly hard to raise money. And I can tell you, Techstars, 16 years, multiple fund, very stable return, like everything's great. The reason why I'm constantly on the plane is because our LP, who have been investing with us for well over a decade, actually 16 years for a lot of them, I have to go and see them and look at them in the eye and be like, yeah, business is great, this is the result. And so that is a fundamental shift in the way venture capital used to be the darling of capital allocator, and now they're looking at us, it's like, I don't know, you guys feel like, you haven't told us really what was happening, and so we're going to be more careful. And so I think this has, as I say, trickle-down effect, because that impacts the VC. I think a lot of VC are basically slowly but surely migrating into zombie mode, where they can't raise their next fund, and so they're still there. They can't file for Chapter 11, but like they can't really raise next, and that in return has an effect on entrepreneurs, because raising money is more complicated. It's still possible, but it used to be that being good was good enough to raise money, and now you have to be great to raise money.
Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that with us. I have been stalking your LinkedIn for a while, because you do some great posts. You guys should stalk her as well. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But you recently had a post about some of the unique personality traits of founders that you've seen. You see a lot of founders, obviously. And I pulled a slide on this. Specifically, they're a significant feature of the startup's ultimate success and differ significantly from the general population. Can you kind of tell the audience what you're seeing about like who makes a good founder?
Sorry, I'm just not catching up on what I wrote a few months ago. I'm hoping I'm still aligned with it. Yeah. Look, I mean, and this comes from a 3-time founder. I think you have to be a little bit delusional to be a founder. I think you have to have this unbelievable resilience, because you're going to fall flat on your face hundreds of times. And the successful founder is the person who gets up the 101 time and is like, okay, let's do it one more time. I've just learned something, let's try again. These are people that tend to be very curious, because again, most successful founders are usually attacking a problem that everybody else around them is telling them, no, that's too complicated, that's impossible, it's already been done, or like, why are you doing that? You could do so much more, going and working for a big company. And so these are people who want to constantly learn, constantly do better, and just to be clear, I'm not saying they're better, I'm just saying they're different. With the pros and cons, like an entrepreneur can be, if you're married to one, good luck. This is, it has its ups and downs. They tend to have ADD, like they're always looking for a new thing to do. And so a lot of what we do at Techstars is focusing them and say like, no, that's the idea, that's the problem we're trying to solve. Like, we understand there's about 150 other shiny things that you want to go after, but like you got to focus, and it's hard. And so entrepreneur, again, I'm kind of one of them. They're lovely people. They're awesome. Like when I'm in a low energy day, what I do is I pick up the phone and I call one of our 4,000 entrepreneurs, and it's just amazing. It's like the shot of positive energy, the stars in their eyes. Like I just had a quick Q&A session with the entrepreneur here in Fort Worth, and like, I mean, you saw them, they're over there, but like, these are unbelievable people, like unstoppable people, which again, look at the world with stars in their eyes, and like, that problem that everybody tells me can't be solved, I'm going to solve it, and I'm going to spend 10 years of my life, I'm dedicated to solving that problem. And I think that's just unbelievable. And so that's why I love being with founders, even though, as I say, we're all a little bit delusional about our impact on the world.
So you, one of the terms that's big in the startup world is a unicorn. And I know you're not necessarily a fan of that term. You've introduced a different term. So tell us about unicorns and the term you've coined to try to describe what you think should really be the goal.
So the problem with unicorn, and just to be clear, I did manage 2 of them, so I'm a little biased, but it's not great manner to bite the hand that fed you. So I've been told. But the problem with unicorn is that unicorn is basically focused on one thing and one thing only, which is valuation. You made $1 billion, congratulations, you're a unicorn, next. Oh, you have a slide, good. Sorry, let me just check that I agree with that too. Yeah, and so usually what it means is scale at all costs. It's like, you gotta get to that valuation. It doesn't matter how much money you're gonna lose, how much money you need to raise, how many bodies you're gonna bury on your way there. Like, all that matters is to get this. And the result of that is that you've seen, especially over the last 5 years-ish, an influx of unicorns, which honestly are only unicorns on paper. And they have very, very flimsy legs. And there's about 1,400 of them. I think I looked at the most recent data. I think about 1,000 of them were created in the last 5 years. Most of them are not actually worth $1 billion. They're worth $1 billion because there are venture capital firm after venture capital firm that decided to fund them every 6, 12 to 18 months. And every time, boom, your valuation will double. And congratulations, you became a unicorn. The fundamental issue that I have with the term unicorn is that it says nothing about the viability of your business. The only thing that it says is, congratulations, you met someone thought that you were probably worth $1 billion by giving you a multiple which was like 150 times revenue. It's like in what world is that sustainable? So now, I use the word dragons. To be honest, there's an entire zoo out there. I've heard many investors using different terms, so you can take mine, you can take others, but I'm a Game of Thrones fan, so that probably came from that, I'm not sure. To me, a dragon is a sustainable business. It's a business that has a proven track record, so it's still $100 million plus valuation, it's still like great revenue, but these are mostly like business who have real defensive moats, who have a really scalable business, who are independent and tenacious and are ready to go to war. If you watch Game of Thrones, you know they're very loyal. That's very important too. And what I mean by loyal is loyal to a problem. Like they fixate on it and they will go through walls to make sure that this business actually survives. They are very, very mindful of their expenses. Like they look at their unit economics. I know it's crazy, right? But like they actually look at how much it's going to spend them to acquire new customers. And I've seen enough unicorns to tell you that they don't really look at that. Should I spend $2 to acquire $1 of revenue? Sure, why not? The investors are there to back that up. And so generally what we've been teaching founders at Techstars is be a dragon, don't be a unicorn. Maybe as you are a dragon, maybe one day you'll also be a unicorn and you'll be this really interesting new animal, which is a unidragon or a dragocorn. I don't know, we're still figuring out that one out. But like, you need to fixate on how do you build a financially sustainable business, a business that is going to create generational wealth for you, for your employees, for your investors. We want that too. But that is still going to be around, and that is not going to be dependent on fundraising every 12 months because that's not sustainable.
Fascinating.
There is at least 10 dragons in the room. You saw them getting up earlier. Like, there are the dragons.
Yeah, they're not unicorns with flimsy legs. I like that.
Nope.
I like that. Okay, so John had some cool charts. We're going to show some cool charts, but they might be scary charts. All right, so you also posted this on LinkedIn. So take a look at this one and explain this one to us. This is from Fortune magazine, and the title is Emerging Managers Are on Track to Raise Less This Year Than They Have in a Decade. That looks like a scary chart.
Yeah, so this is back to the point that I was making earlier. For about 10 years, we saw venture capital growing like mushrooms or multiplying like rabbits. Again, you choose whatever metaphor you want. To the point where when I was asking to the CEO of Carta, for example, how many VC do you think there is in the United States? His answer was like, I'm not really sure because we passed the 2,000 threshold. So there's a few thousand venture capital firms in the United States, but because they keep popping right and left, we don't really have any idea how many of them there are. And now it was possible because, as we were talking about earlier, a certain number of institutionals and family office got really worried that they were missing out, and then they started backing emerging managers right and left. So that's what you see on that chart, where you see even all the way to 2021 was like crazy town, where you would see people 3, 4, 5 years of experience at one of the big tech, no investment experience, leaving and going and raising 30, 50, $60 million. No investment thesis, like not much. So what you see here is basically capital being allocated to emerging managers, growing nicely, then exploding, and then at some point, the capital allocator being, wait a minute, the returns are not there, I'm not gonna get my money for a really long time, the valuation are down. In Q3, a lot of the venture capital firm and venture capital as an asset class posted negative returns. This is a very, very scary asset class to look at when you have this type of return. And so what you see is that in 2023, emerging manager, and usually what qualifies as an emerging manager is someone who has raised 1, maybe 2 funds, usually 1. What you're seeing is that they are struggling to raise their next fund because the people who are who have been backing them in the past are just not ready to do that anymore.
Fascinating. So next chart is about down round funding. So first off, what is a down round? And then can you explain this chart to us?
So down round is when, as a startup, you got, let's say you had a round at 100, and your down round is your investor, existing or new investor, like, yeah, great business, but I'm not ready to support that valuation at 100 million. I'm going to give you a valuation at 80, 60, 50, 40, 20, and yesterday I even heard one company that got a down round at 10 million out of 120 before. So yeah, painful. So that's the down round. Now, again, back to the what I call the Disneyland times, where everything was butterfly and flowers and unicorns and everybody was happy. And no dragons, not enough okay. Dragons. It was the general curve was like you would always do up round, maybe flat round, worst case scenario, and down round was like the worst possible sign for founders. And so you would see founders fighting with their entire energy and time and resources to please do not give me a down round. And so what you will see, by the way, if you look at cap table of company that went through multiple fundraising in the last 5-6 years, is that they have incredibly complicated cap table, because to try to hang desperately onto that at least stable round, stable valuation, and potentially up valuation, they gave investors crazy term. And so you have preferential treatment, and like you look at their cap table and it's full of special rights for investors. And that, again, that's a very separate conversation, but that is also one of the reasons why the venture landscape and the entrepreneurship landscape right now is fundamentally shifting. So we're now in 2023, and basically starting Q4 of last year, it became impossible, even no matter how much gymnastic you were ready to do on your cap table and how many preferential rights you were ready to give, it became impossible to keep having up round. A lot of entrepreneurs did a fantastic job at cutting costs, being much more mindful of their cash flow, and really basically using the money that they had raised in 2021 all the way until first half of 2022 until now. The problem is that there is only so long you can keep going if you're not profitable without fundraising. So again, they did a great job extending the usage of that previous fundraising, but came a time where it was like, oops, I did buddy. The first thing that they did was to go back to their investor and try to get extension of their previous round at the same valuation. Some of them succeeded, some of them did not. And now we're starting to see very clearly, and it happened in Q2. We had been talking about it for about a year, but in Q2 we started, and that's what you basically see on the graph, is that now you're starting to see down round because that's the only option. What we tell our portfolio company is it's okay. A down round still means that someone believes enough in you to give you a check. And that is not a given. we understand that this is painful. We understand that it hurts. We understand that you're going to have to check your ego and be like, my company is worth less than what I thought. But that's still okay. You still keep going. You still have, again, you have investors who believe in you. You have staff who's there to work with you. Like, just keep going. And so, unfortunately, I do expect that there's going to be more down rounds, that it's going to continue to increase, because we're still not yet at a stage where valuation for privately held company are where they need to be. If we want to be even more pessimistic, I do think that there's a large number of the unicorns that I mentioned earlier who are not going to be able to raise, period. Not even at a down valuation, because their business model without regular fundraising is basically not sustainable. And the investors have gotten smarter, and they're looking at them and they're like, there is no valuation at which I'm ready to back you. But hopefully, that's an exception, and that's mostly focused on unicorns. I think most entrepreneurs will hopefully get opportunity to get a down round. And for the entrepreneurs in the room who are facing that, because I'm sure some of you are, even though you probably don't talk about it publicly because you're a little ashamed, don't be ashamed. And I'd like to remind you that the vast majority of companies that went through a down round continued to exist afterwards and went on to having new fundraising afterwards, and like vast majority. So it's okay. Do your down round, keep going, and then do your next up round in a few years.
That's great advice. All right, I want to take it a little bit more kind of local. So Techstars has been building startup ecosystems around the world for almost 20 years now. What's the philosophy behind this, as opposed to other accelerators and other programs where it's move to Silicon Valley, move to New York, move to Boston? How do you guys see this as different? And can tech ecosystems really be anywhere?
Move to Fort Worth, that's what we say.
Yes.
And by the way, there's a problem on this slide, because I was told by Trey that I was absolutely forbidden to use the word Dallas here. So you gotta fix that. I'm sorry.
Nice try. We were close, Trey.
Look, the general philosophy of Techstars is there are talent and great idea everywhere, but opportunities are not distributed evenly. And what we need to do, not out of our heart, though obviously we have big hearts, but because we're investors, what we have to do is to go where others are not going, because that's where opportunities are. I'm a capitalist. I like money. I like making money for myself, for my employees, for my shareholders, for the startup that we're backing. The best way to make money is to go where others are not going, to go and find the opportunities that others are overlooking. And that can take many different formats. That can take the format of going and backing female founders, entrepreneurs of colors, because for whatever reason, the venture community, as you were describing earlier, hasn't considered them as the type of founders that they want to back. And when I look at the return that we can get from these founders, they're unbelievable. So, like, that's a great opportunity. Opportunity exists in terms of geographical focus. For reasons that I think are obvious to everyone, venture capital has a very strong tendency to focus on the coast, and mostly, frankly, Silicon Valley. Why? There's talent everywhere. And so the idea that you have to be in Silicon Valley as a founder to be successful, to make it big, we at Techstars always push back on that. The company was created in Boulder, Colorado, expanded. We only expanded into Silicon Valley last year, because at some point we're like, I mean, Silicon Valley is okay too. Like, we should probably go there. Like,
you don't want to discriminate.
We don't want to discriminate. Like, they also have a right to be supported. But you know, we are in Fort Worth, we are in Tulsa, we're in Baltimore, we're in Chicago, we're in Miami, and we're there because there's incredible talent, phenomenal communities, opportunities to partner with wonderful people, and that is what creates amazing investment opportunity. Again, we're an investor. Like, we live and die by the return we provide to the pension fund and the endowment that we take money from. So it's not charity. When we're backing an entrepreneur, no matter their socioeconomic background, profile, gender, race, age, we back entrepreneurs who are older than 55 years old. It's crazy, right? I know. Like, this is because we see a potential to provide return. And that, to me, when I look at that slide, it's just us saying we want to be where there are entrepreneurs and we want to support them no matter where they are.
Love it. Okay, we're running out of time. Last question. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, including 10 amazing Techstars founders. What's one piece of advice you would give to entrepreneurs and a startup founder? I'll allow 2.
Yeah, because I have so many of them in my mind. Surround yourself with people who are going to be here for you through the ups and downs. Like, I deeply, deeply believe, and I have experienced, no one ever succeeds alone. And as an entrepreneur, the journey ahead of you is tough. Like, it's going to be up and down. It's going to be, you're going to feel on top of the world, and then you're going to feel like your company is about to die, and sometimes it's going to happen within the same day. You're going to feel like you don't know anything. You're going to feel like you have time for nothing. You have to make time for your family. You have to make time for your friend. You have to make time for the community around you, because that's what is going to make the difference for you in the long term. Ultimately, being an entrepreneur, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And if you cannot run that marathon alone, being an entrepreneur is a team sport. You gotta have a great team with you, and you have to have your family with you, because I promise you, they are the ones who will be with you at the end of the day, not your investors, not the mentors, not everyone else, your family. So my biggest advice to entrepreneurs is like, think about your family, think about your spouse, think about your kids, think about your parents, think about the people who are with you, around you, not because you're a unicorn or a dragon or God knows what animal, but because they love you, because they care about you, because they believe in you, and they will believe in you even if your company goes bankrupt. That's totally fine. Nobody succeeds alone. Surround yourself with really great people.
Join me in thanking Maëlle. We're not done yet. We have one more thing. Anne, come on back up. Thank you, Maëlle.
Got this one here. Are we lifting this back up, or should I stay down here? I think I'm, whoa, there goes the clicker.
With the board too?
So we have one last item of business today. It is my privilege to introduce Darlisa Diltz, last year's recipient of the Instigator of the Year Award. Darlisa will present this year's winner. Please come to the stage, Darlisa from North Texas Entrepreneur Education and Training and the 2022 Instigator of the Year of Fort Worth.
Thank you so much, Anne, and welcome everyone. Glad you guys are here today. So, as Anne mentioned, last year I was the recipient of the Instigator of the Year Award, and it was a big surprise. Everything is always a surprise for me. Just like we hope it will be for this year's winner. We started this award to honor one of the roles in the startup community that Brad Feld and Ian Hathaway described in their book, The Startup Community Way. And I will say, if you guys have not read that book, The Startup Community Way is a great book for you to read. They write, instigators work tirelessly to bring their startup communities together. They are central to the genesis of a startup community and sustain meaningful activity over time. This is critical since founders are often too busy building their companies to focus on the bigger picture. These instigators are critical to the startup communities everywhere. Their contributions should be recognized and supported. So, it was decided to do exactly that. Recognizing those instigators in our community are critical to the success of the entrepreneur ecosystem. So it is my privilege to announce the winner of the 2023 Instigator of the Year Award. This year's Instigator is a community leader who has tirelessly served in the city and has brought several new programs to Fort Worth to serve entrepreneurs. She led the effort to reinvigorate the Hispanic North Side through the Main Street Initiative. She led the efforts to bring the Kauffman Foundation's Fast Track program back to the Fort Worth through the Lanzar Initiative, which means launch in Spanish. And the organization she leads is celebrating their 50th year in Fort Worth. It is my great pleasure to announce this year's Instigator of the Year, and the award goes to Annette Landeros, the CEO of Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber. Let's congratulate Annette again.
This is very appropriate. Lanzar is launch. Now I have a rocket to go along with it. Thank you, guys. This is a surprise, very grateful. As mentioned, our Hispanic Chamber has been around for 50 years. So a lot of amazing leaders have come through our Hispanic Chamber. It is a community and a legacy that we're very proud of. I just have the honor and responsibility of leading us forward currently. Since then, my husband and I have also become entrepreneurs. We own Casa Su Coffee, so we sympathize and understand how hard it is to start and keep a business moving forward. It was told to me that you start a business out of either inspiration or desperation. And I would only add, after being an entrepreneur and leading a chamber, that regardless of whichever one was the cause of why you started, you will feel both inspiration and desperation during your entrepreneurial journey. So the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber is just a home. We consider ourselves a welcoming space where entrepreneurs are told, absolutely, that's a great idea, because you already have so many people telling you all the reasons it won't work. So why not go for it? We continue to just champion and make sure that everyone feels like they too add value to our economy, whether you're selling tacos or hot dogs out of a food truck or cups of coffee, or you're building some really cool fancy IT company. You are creating jobs, you are sustaining families, and you are important to our American economy. Regardless of who you are, what language you speak, what country you came from, there's a place for you, and there's definitely a place for you right here in Fort Worth, Texas. So thank you so very much. Appreciate you all. This is a huge surprise. I just want to also point out that Cameron Cushman, Marco Johnson, and now our new friend John, I appreciated all of your comments. But you are white men that are doing it right. I know you said like white men, but I want to say that I know you guys are often put out there as, you know, the folks that are getting 98% of funding. But thank you to those of you that are leading the way and making space for others. So thank you.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Thanks again for coming to the 6th Annual State of Entrepreneurship event in Fort Worth. Thank you again to our sponsors, HSC Next, RSM, for hosting this wonderful event. And thank you to our speakers, Trey Bowles, John Deary, Mayla Gavitt, and we'll see you again next year.